Davidson? Pastor Davidson, I'm sorry. If you don't mind, would you give the invocation for us, please, sir?
Would you bow your heads and pray with me, please? Father in heaven, we thank you for the gift of living in the best small town in America, and for the peace and security that we enjoy today, for the stability that we so often take for granted. Your son Jesus was born in a small town. He grew up under the authority of local leaders and officials. And so, Father, we lift up our local leaders today. We pray for our mayor. We pray for our city council members, for our police chief and his officers, and all, Father, who serve our local communities. We pray, Father, that you would strengthen them for the burdens that they carry. Keep their hearts pure and their eyes turned toward your face as they work in the best interests of the people they are called to serve. Father, we know your word teaches us to pray for those in authority. So we pray for our leaders to have wisdom equal for the task, and we pray that they would govern with wisdom for the common good. We pray for open minds and for listening ears, that our leaders would be open to wise counsel. Father, I pray for all these leaders, the words we read in Isaiah, and the Spirit of the Lord will rest on them, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. He will delight in obeying the Lord. He will not judge by appearance, nor make a decision based on heresy. He will give justice to the poor and make fair decisions for the exploited. Father, we thank you for these and many more gifts. We pray this in the strong name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor. People ask me why I've invited priests, pastors, ministers to say the blessing, the invocation before we get started. And I think you all know why. That was excellent. Thank you for your well thought out prayer. Let me call this meeting to order, please. Let the record reflect that all members of council are present, save Mr. Ross Bradley. And do we have Ross on the phone?
Yes, sir, you do.
All right, thank you. So all members of council are present, either in person or by telephone. I need a motion for the approval of the agenda first, please.
Move to approve.
A motion by Ms. Malcolm. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Nathan Little. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. That passes. Moving to the approval of the consent agenda. This is the council minutes, the executive session, Planning Commission, Historic Preservation, Downtown Development Authority, so on and so forth. Everything we discussed in our work session last week, with the exception of one item that we will revisit in just a few minutes. I need a motion for the approval of the consent agenda, please.
So moved.
A motion by Mr. Gregory. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Crawford. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. That passes. Moving to the public presentation of National Foster Care Month proclamation. I have right in front of me. How many people are here for this? Thank you so, I'm sorry? Great. Thank you so much for coming. I'm going to go ahead and read it, and then we'll hand it off. Whereas we have responsibility as individuals, neighbors, community members, and residents to recognize that all children need love, support, security, and a place to call home. And whereas currently in Walton County, more than 51 families are certified by the Department of Family Services to provide caring, safe, and nurturing homes for children and youth in foster care. And whereas Alcovy Casa, court-appointed special advocates, serves our children in foster care with community volunteers and reports to the juvenile judge on the best interests of the children they serve. And whereas we must come together as a community to recognize the important role foster parents play in caring for children who have experienced abuse and neglect, supporting family reunification and building strong communities. And whereas we must come together as a community to recognize the vital role a CASA volunteer has in the life of a child in foster care in caring for the best interest in being the voice of the child. And whereas during National Foster Care Month, we celebrate all those who have invited a child in need into their hearts and homes and express our profound appreciation for those who make foster care possible. Now therefore, I, John Howard, Mayor of the City of Monroe, do hereby proclaim May 2021 as Foster Care, CASA, and Foster Family Recognition Month in the City of Monroe, and urge all residents to volunteer their time and talents on behalf of children in foster care and to support and recognize the commitment of foster families and professional staff who work with these children and youth. In testimony whereof I have hereunto set my hand and caused to be affixed the Great Seal of the City of Monroe, Georgia, this first day of May, the year of our Lord, 2021. Mayor John S. Howard. Thank you so much for coming, ladies. And you don't have to stick around, but are there anything you would like to say?
Still the pro tem?
Well, thank you. We appreciate your volunteering. We appreciate your big heart. And I appreciate your coming 2 nights in a row. Next, I have another proclamation, and I don't read these quite as quickly as Mr. Rosenthal, but I try. As a matter of fact, I've been asked to put this one aside till next month. This is a proclamation to posthumously honor Captain Lachlan of the City of Monroe. So we'll do that one next month. His family was,
Opposite,
wait, are we good?
opposite, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Proclamation of the City of Monroe, Georgia. Whereas we have responsibility as individuals, neighbors, community members, and residents to recognize that all children need love. That might have just handed Lindsay the wrong one. Here we go. I'm sorry. Proclamation to posthumously honor Captain Joseph Lachlan of the City of Monroe Fire Department for his 29 years of service to the citizens of Monroe and Walton County. Whereas in 1976, Joe Lachlan began his career as the City of Monroe Fire Department and served under 4 fire chiefs until his retirement in 2008. And whereas during his 29 years of service, Captain Lachlan served as a firefighter and driver, rising through the ranks in numerous positions before his final promotion as a captain. And whereas during his time, the City of Monroe Fire Department, Captain Lachlan witnessed significant change and provided much mechanical knowledge of the fire department. And whereas Captain Lachlan served the citizens of Monroe and Walton County with distinction and was held in high esteem by his colleagues. And whereas it is recognized that Captain Lachlan passed away on May 30th, 2020, and will be greatly missed by those whose lives he affected. Now, therefore, I, John S. Howard, Mayor of the City of Monroe, and on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim this 11th day of May, 2021, that Captain Joseph Lachlan be and is hereby recognized and posthumously honored by the City of Monroe, Mayor and Council, for his 29 years of meritorious service to the citizens of Monroe, and be it proclaimed further that the City of Monroe, Mayor and Council extends their warmest gratitude to the family of Captain Lachlan and express sincere thanks for his years of dedicated service to our community. In testimony whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the City of Monroe to be affixed this 11th day of May, the year of our Lord, 2021. Mayor John S. Howard. And do I have someone here to receive this? Jack? Thank you so much for coming. And I'm sorry, your name? Jonathan. Thank you so much. A lot of Lachlan's. You miss Lachlan. Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate the service. Now, again, we did have one more proclamation tonight that we have put off until next month. And thank you, folks, for being here. And you do not you don't have to stay. I appreciate it. If you want to watch, you're more than welcome. Moving next to our public forum, we have 3 people here for comments. Gerald Atha first from Poplar Street, if you'd like to proceed.
I appreciate the council giving me the time to speak.
Yes, sir.
Even though I got to make it quick, 5 minutes, I wish I had more time, but I'll go ahead and start. Here because of the Silver Queen project.
Wait, I'm sorry. You and Mr. Chick are together? I mean, I was going to
He's got 5 minutes too.
Oh, sure, I was going to recognize him right after, so, okay.
Okay, yeah. Anyway, this is not the first time I've been flooded. When the Dairy Queen started their project a couple of years ago, they filled in the parking, what's the parking lot now. The water used to run down to Hubbard Street. They filled in, paved the parking lot, and slanted back towards the Dairy Queen and created a V. And all the water run down the bank and caused what's in those pictures right there, washing the bank that I used to cut with a lawnmower, and was washing mud and water into my buildings. Of course, I tried to get something done about it, and finally, I had to do something on my own, so I started fixing it, and Mr. Ike at the Dairy Queen told me he would pay for it. So I started cutting it out and everything, and then the code department said that I need to get a permit, and then I need to get an engineer for the wall. So I did all that, and then fixed it, as you can see in those pictures right there. I spent $10,000 fixing it. And then Mr. Ike told me that he was not going to pay for it because he done everything the city required him to do. So I was stuck with that. And now to the Silver Queen, I'm sure several of you saw what was going on there. There used to be a ditch between the Silver Queen and my property, which is a 20-foot driveway. I got the one down to my property. And they hauled in dirt and filled it up, filled in the ditch and piled dirt even over on my property. So I came to the code office and told them what was going on. I was being flooded because he told me that I should have come to him about the Dairy Queen. So I said, well, you told me to come to you. I should have came to you. So I'm coming to you now to complain about all the mud and water that's going on my property. So this went on a year. I was very patient. I kept coming to the code office, talking to the contractor, talking to Mr. Williams. They never would do anything about it. And he come down toward the end. I said, why come you can't red flag them or what, or do something about it? He said, well, I can't do it. And the code officer said, I can't do anything about it. My hands are tied. What he meant by that, I don't know. But anyway, I was flooded, and Mr. Chick's flooded, and finally, same thing. I had to end up doing something myself. Mr. Pro got an engineer to come look, and they drew up a plan, but it was taking up 5 foot of my driveway, plus it was still making the water run off on me. It wasn't helping all for us getting the water in the retention pond. So I ended up having to fix it myself, and I got some pictures of that too. And I spent $18,000 fixing that. And then, come to find out, Mr. Chick is being flooded. He said he hadn't been flooded till all this started. And he's been flooded for the last year. And so I guess he'll tell you his side of it. I finally fixed where I'm the only one in the area that's got a retention pond. All the water from across Broad Street, all what comes down Highland Avenue, it runs down Highland Avenue, turns down Wayne Street, and it used to could run across the parking lot, the lot where Silver Queen is. And they created a dam by building that sidewalk. Plus 2/3 of their water off the building, they got it guttered coming off on my driveway. So not only are we getting all the water across the road, even out of this parking lot right here comes over on us. And it's just created us being flooded.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Mr. Chick?
My name is Tom Chick, and I've been a resident here all my life, and I want to thank everybody for the opportunity to speak before you. I appreciate it. I own the buildings on West Spring Street there, 202, 204, and 206. 202 and 204 has been flooded in the last year. With the excessive rain that is coming off of Wayne Street, it turns down by Silver Queen, goes to Gerald, and comes to my place, and it's running in the back doors. I lost a tenant at 202 because of it, and then 204, we ended up removing the carpet out of it. And then since then, we've had other flooding issues. I met with people here on the city, and I kind of had a similar response from our hands are tied to we'll get back in touch with you. You don't need to call us, we'll call you. Okay, I'm like Gerald, I'm patient, but it's been months and months now, and we have not had it resolved. So here I am with 204, and it's down to concrete now. We pulled all the carpet out in the past. With the last rain, I stood there and watched it run down Wayne Street. Where the drains are, the water goes on the other side of the drains, meets the curb, goes down the curb line to Gerald's, and the pond just turns into white water on its way down, and then it comes off on us, runs in the back of the building. So we're being flooded. So as many good things as the city's done, which they've revived downtown Monroe, which has been good, there's some infrastructure problems underground that need to be addressed because we're getting a lot of water, and with all the asphalt and concrete surfaces, it becomes impermeable, and it's just running off to the next fella below. And unfortunately, in this case, it's me. It goes from Silver Queen to this new lot now on Wayne Street, crosses to Silver Queen, goes to Gerald. I'm the lowest guy on the property, so I'm getting it in my building. That's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Chick. I do have a question for our team, anyone who may have an answer or know an answer. As we're getting ready to do some work on Wayne Street, is there anything we can do to make that impact less obtrusive?
Yeah, so as we're right now drafting up some engineering plans for a Wayne Street streetscape, and that'll include some stormwater improvements along that stretch that you're speaking of. So I hope that helps a lot. You know, I don't want to get into all the background on these cases here tonight. I can speak to everybody later on, but I have extensive documentation on all of this and what's been done, what is the problem, what may not be a problem, you know, whose responsibility and where that lies. And we've had engineers out there to draw up some plans. I mean, I got to be honest, you know, I was out there last Monday. I personally went out there just to check because it was pouring rain when we had that 4-inch deluge. I personally went out there and looked, and everything in the ditches were functioning as they should and as by design, especially after that fix I think Mr. Atha did. I didn't know he did it, but working by design. There was no water intrusion to that building during that deluge. You know, there's plenty of other small fixes I think that'll give you some remedy, and it may not all be on the city side. But all that to say, we do have some plans to drastically improve that stormwater area on Wayne Street.
I was out there as well that day with Umbrella and got some videos too. And like I said, when it gets on the other side of the drain where the curbing is, okay, so if this is the building and curbing, the drain's right here toward the road. Once it gets past those, turns and runs that wall that it has to follow the sidewalk, turns there on Silver Queen. When it runs down, it's rushing to Gerald's Pond. From there, where it comes over to his retention pond, comes down in 3 different directions. You got it on the Ford near West Spring Street. Then there's one in the middle, and then there's one off its lot. And so there's been some repair there, unbeknown to me how it got done, but it's almost like a berm was built to try to hold it there when it runs off 3 directions. And you're right, the water didn't swirl or turn or back up that day, but if any debris gets over there, that's when it'll sometimes start to stop up.
So hopefully that fix will suit us until our improvements are done in Wayne. Let's all keep an eye on it, especially over the coming 6 to 9 months.
Yeah.
So I have one question.
Okay.
What I hear you saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, but all of that water that's coming down Wayne and turning is being funneled into a retention pond that was not built for all that water. It was built for only the runoff on that.
That's correct. When I went out there, when it was raining the other day, there's water that pools up in the back of Silver Queen. And it pools up till it gets high enough on the curb, and then it comes over in sheets of water. Some of it runs past the riprap, some of it runs down toward Gerald, but it fills up the parking lot in the back till it rises up to the curb, comes over the curb, and just runs off in sheets. Then it just goes any direction. But yes, the drain works fine as long as it stays unstopped. But if there's any debris that gets there and it stops, how the water's getting in my building, I don't know. But it just started in the probably since April or May of last year.
Sure.
Used to, it was plenty to hold the water that had coming, but now, instead of the water running across the parking lot where Silver Queen is, it's all turning, coming down my driveway, plus 2/3 of the water off the building. You can go down there and look, they got all the gutters coming out shooting on my driveway, under that walkway down through there. That water used to go down through the parking lot, plus all what's across the road, coming down Highland Avenue, turning down the hill. If you stand on Wayne Street, you'll see all the water, when it turns, it used to turn and go down across that lot over there. It can't do it anymore because the sidewalk down through the block is like a dam. So it hits that, like he said, hits that sidewalk and runs down and comes down my driveway. And used to, you can ask Brian, that's got the building on the corner in front, that never did fill up. And now, we've seen it, almost come over the top of the wall because it's so much water. It's got all the extra water.
But the loss here for myself in the city is I lose a tenant, but y'all lose the electric and the gas and the water and the sewer and the trash and the permit, whatever they pay. You know, you lose a tenant, I lose a tenant.
Right. Well, let's just make sure that we have everything covered on our end to keep that from happening. And then once we're gonna have to go further and continue to keep an eye on it.
Fair enough.
You know, nobody wants you to lose a tenant. Nobody wants to, on our end, wants to lose utility rates. But
That's
frankly, let's just fix it.
That's right.
So we'll do everything the city can do legally.
Right.
And hopefully, the current fix plus what we're about to do will work for everybody.
I mean, all the businesses, everything around's been great. Everybody admires everything that's been done. But there's some other things that are happening that some people don't see. And some of it's got to be addressed.
I get it. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming in, Mr. Chick. Ms. Larson. How are you? Good.
Basically, three separate things I wanted to speak on, but I'll be quick.
Yes, ma'am.
Number one, and maybe nothing can be changed because of Robert's Rules of Orders or whatever, but why do the public comments have to start at the beginning of the meeting so we can't comment on anything that's said during the meeting? It's kind of like we have to guess what's going to happen and or to say, address it before the meeting even starts. But main thing I wanted to say is, last time I was at a meeting, there was all this praise about how wonderful these medians were that went down Church Street. I'm a Church Street resident and tried to stop them from happening. They were wonderful, wonderful, and had it slowed the traffic down. Now I understand the city is considering putting in traffic cameras, which one of them is going to go in on Church Street. Why? To deal with the speeding on Church Street. And why couldn't we have done, we had asked before, why can't we just have some traffic tickets done on Church Street? Couldn't be done, but now it's going to be done after the fact of putting in all these medians. Another issue is the money, the huge expenditure that is being proposed at the green space. Why now? That has been proposed for 3 years when everybody is complaining about the building costs and the construction costs because everything has skyrocketed. Now the city is planning on taking out millions of dollars in loans, which hopefully will have the money to pay off, to build this thing that we have no idea how it's going to be. And that's it. I'm done.
Thank you, Ms. Larson. Appreciate your comments. And I will respond to one regarding the Church Street cameras. Those are going in front of schools only if they decide to move forward with it tonight. So it's not going to speeders on Church Street or speeders in any particular place. It's only in school zones, I believe, that Chief Watts will be discussing in just a little bit. Let's move forward, please. And thank you for coming, and thank you for your input. Moving to the public hearing of the variance of 803 East Spring Street. Mr. Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The applicant at 803 East Spring Street is requesting a variance to allow for them to exceed the number of permitted parking spaces. They are required to have 17. They would be permitted by ordinance to have 21. They want to have 27, I believe, is what they have on their plan. They would be exceeding the maximum permitted by variance by the code office, so they're here requesting that. And we would point out that they would still remain under the 60% impervious surface on their lot totally. So it could be paved even without parking spaces on it. So we recommend, and planning and zoning recommended approval without conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Are there any questions for Patrick? Hearing none, I'll declare this portion of the meeting open for public comment. Are there any comments in favor of this variance? Are there any comments opposed to this variance? I know we've discussed this quite a bit. Any comments from council? Hearing none, I'll declare that portion of the meeting closed, and we'll revisit that in just a few minutes. Moving next to the rezone at 961 Good Hope Road. Mr. Kelly?
Yes, sir. Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. Just as we spoke of the other one last week, this one was covered fairly extensively in last week's meeting as well. It's a request for a rezone at 961 Good Hope Road to remove the commercial component of that development and replace it with new single-family attached townhomes in that area and whatever else they have proposed. We recommend approval, as does, nope, we didn't get a recommendation from planning and zoning. We recommend approval with the conditions that we had listed in the staff report, two of which I believe have already been provided, 1,600 square foot minimum house size, and they gave us 7 instead of 6 building designs. So the additional one would be, they'd provide a minimum of 3 of the following amenities: pool, playground, pavilion, clubhouse, fitness center, play courts, such as but not limited to tennis, volleyball, or basketball. So, and any other considerations the council might wish to make, absent a recommendation from planning and zoning.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Are there any questions for Patrick?
Do you know what percentage of these homes will be rental properties?
No, there's no way to determine that.
Could we put a percentage limit on that?
That would typically be handled at the property owner, homeowner, developer level. And again, I don't know that any of them are being built to rent, but you can never know that, really and truly. Because if it's single-family detached or single-family attached, it's fee simple properties. And then if somebody buys it and decides to rent it, that's their decision.
Legally, is that something that we could require?
Legally, generally, our advice is to stay away from that. There are some cities that have wandered into that realm. Usually, your rental limitations you see within HOA restrictive covenants that are placed at the private level. So this development would be required to have an HOA, but generally, we would not advise that we delve into the foray of limiting rentals, but we do see it in HOA restrictive covenants at the private level or the developer level. But even then, there's some limitations on those. Usually, I think it's like a 25% maximum, and they have sort of a certification or registration process for rentals, and then there has to be some due process requirements that provide for undue hardship provisions when you have someone pass away and the estate needs to rent it and those sort of things. So our experience is generally the better course for the city is to stay away from limiting rentals within single-family, fee simple developments. However, we have seen some cities do it, but it is not without potential issues. But you certainly may see it at the private level, meaning the developer themselves, to have a better project or what might be considered more homeowner-based and a higher quality project with fewer rentals, can place those limitations in place with certain parameters, usually limited to no more than 25% rentals is usually what we see in HOA documents done by the developer at the private level. But our advice would not be to get into that at the city level.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. I'll declare this portion of the meeting open for public input. Is the applicant here, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman, my name is Bob Smith with Smith Planning Group, and it's a pleasure to be here tonight. And I'm representing McKinley Homes, and Bill Schmidt with McKinley Homes is with me here tonight as well. I stood before this body 18 years ago when this property was first rezoned to PCD. And as you know, this property has a mixture of housing types consisting of 24 townhomes and 102 single-family detached homes, but also 35,480 square feet of commercial area in front of the development along Good Hope Road. The design of the project gave a lot of effort into the design of the public realm. That means we intentionally designed tree-lined streets, 5-foot sidewalks on both sides of the street. Keep in mind, this was 18 years ago. All the homes having a front porch and pushed snug to the sidewalk and lifted above grade. All of this was in and remains in the design guidelines for the development. Garages are accessed by alleys in the rear of the homes, which means you have no front entry garages except for a small number of homes in back of the development where an alley was not feasible. The current current zone does have a commercial area. The reason for the commercial area was to give the residents of the development and surrounding area a walkable destination. It was integral to the plan, and at that time, it was embraced. But a lot has changed since then. Of course, as you know, construction of the project ceased during the recession, but not before infrastructure such as water and sanitary sewer lines were installed, storm drain systems, streets and alleys were constructed. The improvements have been sitting there unused for the past 17 years. Fortunately, the systems are in remarkably good shape. The petitioner has been hard at work cleaning up the site and assessing the systems, peering down manholes, and cameraing the pipe network. During their original rezoning of the tract to PCD, we prepared a set of development guidelines to ensure the quality of the development is carried out. As I mentioned earlier, these items included lifting the houses off the ground. That means no on-grade slabs. 8-foot wide front porches that can actually be used. 5-foot wide sidewalks on both sides of the street, and a tree program requiring street trees planted at 30-foot intervals. The planning staff has done a great job over the years protecting the integrity of the original intent. There have been several builder groups come along over the years to try to erase the guidelines, abandon the alleys, and make this development a conventional subdivision just like all the others. The current petitioner, McKinley Homes, who I represent tonight, has embraced the design guidelines and accepted the conditions of the original design. The only thing that is changing is the removal of the commercial component. Now, the slide before you now is the existing development. You can see the commercial area out front. Do you guys have a screen behind, or is everybody looking at this one? Okay, all right. The commercial area is out front right here. You can see a commercial building here here, here, and of course, these parking lots. These parking lots are in right now, and they're slated to be removed and this area converted to open space. Next. So this is an aerial photograph of the current conditions. You can see the parking lots here, you can see the street network, and you can see the alleys. All of your infrastructure is already in. And this is the current design. The overall green space area in this area is a little greater than 1.86 acres. And elements in the green space will include a pavilion, a mail kiosk, a playground, and unprogrammed lawn space, such as a multi-purpose lawn. Surrounding and framing the green space are 44 townhomes. That's what these are right here. There's an increase of 16 from the current plan, and they're basically taking the place of the commercial uses. The placement of the townhomes creates a sense of enclosure and frames this very public open space park. Like I said, it's a very public space, and the intent of the area is a more formal, passive amenity. This means providing gathering areas, providing benches along sidewalks, and having an unprogrammed spaces such as the multi-purpose lawn. The petitioner accepts the condition staff has included in their report. However, we do request that condition number 3 be modified to include park benches and the multi-purpose lawn areas as one of the 3 amenities required. The petitioner intends to construct an architecturally iconic pavilion in the center of the park, flanked by a matching mail kiosk and a playground. In lieu of a basketball court or volleyball court, as suggested in the condition, the petitioner would like to use park benches and the lawn to be included as amenities. The benches would be placed along the arched sidewalk facing the townhomes. That's right in here. This was a design element in the original plan and should be counted as a neighborhood amenity. During the Planning Commission meeting, we also discussed the installation of a low hedge along the front of the development, along the right-of-way of Good Hope Road here. We are certainly agreeable to that and think it would be an asset to the park. That concludes my report. Like I said, Bill Schmidt is with me here tonight, and either of us will be happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming in.
You bet.
Is there anybody here who would like to ask questions of the developer or the builder? Hearing none, a lot of us have been reviewing this one too. Hearing none, is there anyone here in the audience who would like to speak in favor of this rezone? Or the variance, I'm sorry. Is there anyone here who'd like to speak against?
It's a rezone, Mayor.
Thank you. A little flustered. There's a rezone. Is there anyone here who'd like to speak against? Hearing none, I'll declare that portion of the meeting closed, and we'll revisit that in just a few minutes. Moving to new business, the variance at 803 East Spring Street. I'll open the floor to council members for discussion only, or action.
I move approval of what's been requested.
I have a motion on the floor by Mr. Larry Bradley. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Norman Garrett. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries, that passes. Moving to the rezone at 961 Good Hope Road, I'll open the floor to council members only for discussion.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I have comments and I also have a motion.
Yes, sir.
So let me make the motion first and then I'll make the comments, if that's all right. I've previously voted, I think, a couple of times to kill this project because the plan presented just really wasn't what I felt was in the city's best interest. This one, I think, is different. So I'm going to move to approve the rezone, remove the commercial aspect, and have it be a residential PRD. I think that's appropriate. No plan is perfect, but this is much better than what we've had presented before. And they're requesting, I do want my motion does include the staff recommendations for conditions, except on number 3, part of my motion is to modify that to do the green space instead of the play courts, that they can do the green space that Mr. Smith talked about. So that's my motion, Mr. Mayor.
I have a motion on the floor by Mr. Dickinson with a second by Mr. Garrett, with the conditions being as set forth by Mr. Kelly and planning staff, with the exception of number 3, to allow for that passive green space. A second, again, by Mr. Garrett. Is there any discussion?
I would just comment that I support the motion that's here because I think residential area there in that front area as opposed to commercial is the advantageous to us all. So I will support the motion.
Totally agree. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. That passes. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate your 18 years of patience. Moving to the application of beer and wine on-premise consumption at Europi. Mr. Rosenthal?
Yes, that application is in order, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. As the business owner.
Mr. Mayor, I'd also like to make a note, I recuse myself from this vote.
Thank you, Ross. I appreciate that. And I have the owner here? Unless you would like to come say something, I don't think you're going to need to. Okay. Are there any questions for the owner, or would you like to just go ahead and make a motion?
I move to approve.
I have a motion to approve by Mr. Gregory. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Ms. Malcolm. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. That passes. Moving to the application of spiritus liquors and beer and wine consumption on premise at Tacos and Beer Bar and Grill. Mr. Rosenthal, is that in order?
Yes, Mayor, that application is in order.
Thank you as the business owner here. Thank you for coming tonight. Would you like to say anything? Thank you. I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve.
I have a motion by Mr. Gregory to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
A motion by Ms. Malcolm to second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. That passes. Moving to the Red Speed presentation, Chief Watts.
Thank you, Mayor. If you don't mind, I'd like to call Greg Parks from Red Speed up to do a small presentation.
Thank you. Are you Mr. Parks?
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor, Council, Chief. I'm glad I was able to make it this week. I got a good view of Monroe and the greater Atlanta area, circling for 4 hours over Hartsville last week. So I feel like I know the area well now. But as the Chief said, do have a very short presentation, probably 5 minutes tops, and then going through the logistics, details of the program, how it would work if you elected to move forward. And then I know from your last meeting, there may be some questions, so I'll do my best to answer all of those.
Thank you.
Why are you looking, why has the chief brought a school zone safety program to this body for your consideration? As evidenced just by this meeting, your population's growing, traffic's heavy in Georgia, and as you get closer into Atlanta, Georgia ranks 36 out of 51. That's the 50 states plus Puerto Rico for school zone safety. So there's a problem around the state. And as you're going to see here in a couple slides, there's very heavy traffic and a high level of speeding in your school zones in Monroe right now as well. The chief commissioned us to do this study to see if it's a program he'd like to bring to you for your consideration. I'll go through the details of the law in a minute, but it's a very conservative law. And these numbers you're seeing are for one school day, and motorists who were at least 10 miles per hour over the posted limit while school was in session. At two roads at George Walton Academy, there were almost 1,200 and over 1,500 speeders in one school day, 10 over the posted limit. And then at Monroe Area High on Drake, they're over 1,000. So, and I definitely want to say it's not an indictment or an opinion on the level of enforcement or Monroe as a community. We have over 50 customers in Georgia, and this is just consistent with what we see until the program is implemented, then these numbers go down dramatically. So the legislature did recognize that there is a statewide issue or improvements could be made for speeding in front of school zones. So in the 2018 session, they passed enabling legislation, House Bill 978. It's a statewide law. It can be used in any school zone, only schools. It was brought up earlier on Church Street, as the mayor correctly commented. This can only be used in a school zone on the list of roads by GDOT, nowhere else in the community. Very conservative law. The police department can cite somebody at 1 or 2 miles per hour if they chose to in the school zone. This is only 10 over, and actually we cited 11 over because radar is accurate within 1 mile per hour. So we give an extra mile per hour grace to the motorist. So in a 25, that's 40% over the posted limit. So terrible speeding. There's a 30-day warning period. Anybody that goes through the first 30 days at each school will get a notice in the mail, please slow down, there's no fine, but this program is coming. We also partner that with really robust at our expense PSA campaign, printed material, social media. We have a videographer. I think the chief may have shown some of that to the Public Safety Committee. It's only enforced on days school's in session. So not at night, not on the weekend, not during summer break. When kids could be there is the purpose of the law. There's a number of levels of approval to this. The school system must sign off as well, agreeing that there's a problem to be solved. George Walton Academy would be the headmaster, whatever the chief executive is called. At the Walton County Schools would be the superintendent. Then GDOT must approve this as well. So there's multiple layers that there is a problem, agreeance that there's a problem to be solved. It's a relatively modest fine at $75. That's probably about a third what an officer written ticket would be. And by law, there's no points or insurance. It's a civil violation. It goes against the vehicle. Something unique to the law, to Georgia, and I'll give the legislature a lot of credit, all the fines generated by this program must go back to public safety. They don't go to the general fund. They're not viewed by the public as a tax, that it's used for additional cars, radar, school resources officers. So it's a great aspect of the law, we think. So how's the program work? I probably should lead with this at each council meeting. There's no out-of-pocket cost to the city whatsoever. It's all violator funded. We install, maintain the equipment, we capture violations, we mail them, but important to note, all are approved and signed by a Monroe sworn certified peace officer. So a private company is not approving violations. We're just the agent for the police department. Fines are $75. It's a 65-35 split, 65 to the city, 35 to us. They get no expenses to the city at all other than the staff time of police approving that violation. In addition to reducing speeds, which is the core issue of the program, ALPR and HD video comes with this included. So Amber Alerts in front of schools, the police department and the city will receive at no cost. And some great HD video that we've had a number of crimes unrelated to speeding in front of schools that our video has helped police solve. And that would be a 6-figure investment by the city that comes with the program at no cost to you all. And it's not a bleeding edge program. It's heavily vetted over the last several years in Georgia. And some of your neighbors like Snellville, Alpharetta, Duluth, and Roswell have really successful programs where less than 5% of violators are getting a second ticket. There's very little recidivism, and that's the best metric to show that it's working. So to wrap it up, I think fast presentations are best for all. It's definitely going to improve safety around the schools. It's proven throughout the state. No out-of-pocket costs to the city.
And the police are going to receive the extra technology I talked about, Amber Alerts, video to help solve crashes or, God forbid, other worse things in front of the school. So I know from your last meeting, I think there may be some questions, so be happy to try and answer those.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions? Mr. Parks or Chief Watts?
Yeah, I do.
Yes, sir.
A few questions if I could. I understand from Chief Watts that the city has flexibility in administering the program, is that?
That's correct, yes, sir. And elements with that would be, do you want to enforce 11 over, 12 over, et cetera? There are some parameters of the law. It can only be when school's in session, only in front of the school. But yes, and the police department have full discretion to sign off on each citation, as an officer would be on the road.
Back to the first part, and then I want to respond to that one. But so in other words, if the city said, we want to do 15 over, that would be okay.
That's your prerogative, yes, sir.
And the second part of that is the part you just said, where a police officer has to sign off on things, I guess.
Yes, and maybe some context, a 20-second overview of how it would work. The alleged violation is captured. We have two humans in our headquarters review it, that yes, school was in session that day, yes, the license plate is correct, a bunch of data elements. Once those two humans agree that we believe it's a proper violation, it is then sent electronically to the police department and a sworn officer. It takes about a few seconds. They can do 3 or 4 in a minute. But they would sit down at a computer, verify school was in that day, if the inlet's license plate return is correct, et cetera, then he or she would have full discretion for approve or reject.
But
That's a long answer,
But based on your study that you did earlier, there could be 4,000 or 5,000 of these happening in a single day. I mean, I don't expect the officers to have to look at 4,000.
Yeah, what are typically, well, it can't be approved and mailed out without an officer approval. Typically, what we've seen in our 50 Georgia customers, even during the 30-day warning period, that number will be cut in half. And then during the first 6 months, that'll be cut in half or more again. Don't want to get a ticket.
Another question on the flexibility, and I mentioned this to Chief Watts last week, I guess, and I'm not sure what we want to do, but if Monroe wanted to enforce this, during the 1 hour before school to 1 hour after school takes in, and again at the end of the day, 1 hour on either side, rather than in all day long, is that flexibility okay?
It certainly is encompassed in the law. The law contemplates the 9-hour day, hour before through the day. The only thing we need to do on that, we need to look at some contractual. The direct answer is yes, it's your program. If we ran our numbers based on a 9-hour day, there may be a slight financial difference, minimal, but you absolutely.
Okay, and then who mails the citation out to the violator?
We do.
You handle the mailing?
We printed it.
Okay. So that we don't need any equipment for mailing or?
No, the only equipment used is existing PCs that are already here. There's no software installed. It's all web-based. Very secure, but we print and mail it, yes.
And maybe perhaps the last question is, why would the city want to contract with you as opposed to buying this equipment and operating itself?
It's significant expense and a lot of institutional knowledge on how to operate it. There's not a program, I believe, in the country where municipalities doing this themselves. It's just, I guess anything's possible, but it's pretty complex.
I guess in some of the cities you just mentioned, you have customers, have gotten critical news media coverage, for this, both TV coverage as well as printed media, I guess, have criticized some.
Critical headlines, if you happen to see the bodies of the stories, are mostly positive. But our good friends in the press do notice it, yes.
Okay. I just have some concerns when any party to something is rewarded on tickets, on fines. And obviously, from your perspective, that's the only way you get paid. So from your perspective, the more fines the better, because that's the way you make your money, you know, I understand.
Well, yes and no, and I
One
understand.
part of that just gives me some concern of the incentive to do more tickets is there for some party involved with this.
Well, a
Not
couple-
for the city, I think cities and Chief Watts' concern would be to make school zones safe, and I agree with him on that, you know, of doing it. Your incentive, obviously, be to,
Well, we're absolutely a for-profit company. I wouldn't hide from that. But safety is our product. The fact that Snellville has 5% repeat violators, that Alpharetta violations are down by half, that's the product we're selling are the results. And we can't generate more violations than there are. The people that are speeding, we send to the police for approval or rejection. The numbers are that we have no control over who's speeding.
Do you have some type of real number? You keep saying Snellville. Approximately how many tickets are they giving out per week?
I don't know. It's a pretty large program. Snellville's heavily trafficked, but I don't know the exact number.
I'm somewhat feeling like Larry. It almost sounds like a cash cow to me. Just another way to just get revenue.
Well, you're absolutely, Councilman, entitled to your opinion. I would say that it's a way, most cities don't have extra police staff to sit out there and enforce speeds in front of the schools. In fact, the IECP, which is International Association of Chiefs of Police, refer to it as a force multiplier. It frees up the police to do community policing and other things that are needed in a growing community. So, and the violations go down. It improves school safety dramatically at no expense.
My next question, who actually receiving these tickets? Or the driver or whoever the license plate actually?
It's the registered owner, just like a parking ticket or a toll ticket, which is common practice in Georgia. And that's why there's no points or insurance ramifications.
So the kid could be speeding, but the parent don't get the ticket.
And usually parents are happy to know if the child is endangering people in their vehicle. I'd want to know.
My question to RV, how many accidents had they had in front of the schools?
We can definitely pull that data from our Walton County 911 Center. But I know we just had one a week and a half ago, where George Walton Academy student was actually trying to turn into the school campus and was hit head-on. And I know we actually have worked, I believe, a fatality on Michael Edgerton, where we had an individual ran over out there, I think, a couple of years ago. But I can pull that data for you, Mr. Garrett, if you want to see it.
I would like to actually see that, just to see, because I mean, when I sit here and think about it, we putting out cameras to figure out a way to give tickets, that don't make a whole lot of sense to me.
To reduce speeding in front of the school, does it make sense? No cost?
If they having accidents, it makes sense. If you're looking for ways to get money, that don't make sense.
We certainly don't believe this should be a revenue program for the city. And you're elected leaders. You'll make what's in the best judgment, your best judgment for the city. The fact that you haven't had a crash yet probably is not a reason not to reduce speeding.
What happens if people decide not to pay the fine? If it's not a...
Yeah, and the law, the legislature, this is a very good conservative law, and the legislature contemplated that. So if a resident does not pay the citation, you have multiple attempts. 3 notices are sent. You have your right in court to do the ticket, that a registration is hold because it goes against the vehicle. So there's.
Are there any other questions? I have one.
Yes, sir.
Does it have to be for speeding? And I'm thinking specifically on Church Street. We have a problem with trucks. If we can capture those tags and send fines to those owners or corporations?
It could be used as an evidentiary gathering tool. There is no law in Georgia that allows a photo ticket. It's for speeding, is what this law addresses.
Greg, if I can just intervene for a second.
Yeah.
On Church Street, though, that's not actually registered as a school zone, correct? We couldn't actually implement this on Church Street, I think, when you did the study.
But let me comment about that. Look at that table of the violations where they went out there and tested them. You've got 1,500 on one side of George Walton, 1,200 on the other side. 375 on one side of Monroe area, almost 1,100 on the other. You've got 15. I don't even have to take both my shoes off to count those on Church. Gee, I guess those traffic islands must work, because you only got 15 vehicles.
That's exactly right, Mr. Dixon.
So Church Street's not.
Right.
I don't
It's
think
not even going to happen on Church Street.
So what you're saying is those islands are working on Church Street?
They work, but I'm not saying we need to put them on Etchison or anywhere else. I've been beat to death over those things, but they do work.
Okay, do I have any more questions?
What's the duration of a program like this, and at what point could we opt out of it if we were to implement it, and if we found out it wasn't something we liked?
At what point would we, is there a trial period?
Well, there's a 30-day warning period, but the initial contract term is 1 year. And then there's termination for convenience after that. We've never had anybody terminate. We've never had a council elect not to move forward. If during the program, the city was not happy, you can even terminate prior to the year. Just there's some cost recovery necessary, but the fines would easily cover that. So there's not a long-term commitment. The contract is annual, but with termination for convenience after the 365th day with no penalty.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments?
And just to be clear, sort of on the legal side, if this is something y'all want to go forward with, you could choose to do so tonight or not, but there are still other people that have to sign off on it before this would even be in place. GDOT has to approve it. The school board and/or the private school board or headmaster will have to approve it. So y'all are one piece of the puzzle, but y'all control these roads. So y'all have to say yes, GDOT has to say yes, and your chief has to be able to implement it, which obviously he's brought it before you. So there's multiple pieces to the puzzle to make it all happen. Just want to make sure y'all understood that. It wouldn't just start tomorrow if y'all said, oh, we want to do it.
No, that's absolutely correct. And we view that as a positive, that there are layers of approval for people that are experts in traffic, GDOT, the school on their local area. The GDOT process is fairly time-consuming. So if in fact you did, there's no hard sell here, but if in fact you wanted to implement this in the fall, it would need to begin fairly shortly. They're a methodical group.
That does bring up another question. Is it Double Springs Church? Is that Monroe area? What's the road that goes in from Double Springs Church?
And Drake.
Drake is the one that's got the problem.
Are those county roads? Are they city?
City streets.
Drake would be city, right?
All those are city streets.
Okay. Michael Etchison goes in and out of the city and the county, all of it behind George Walton is city?
Behind the city is, or behind George Walton is City Street.
Okay.
And also, I just want to note that I have already spoken with Superintendent Nathan Franklin about this as well, and he fully supports us if we want to move forward.
Any other questions or comments or motion?
Just one comment based on what Mr. Dixon said about Church Street. Would it practical for us not to do those roundabouts, but to do some type of traffic control in these areas as opposed to this? I mean, would that make any sense at all? If it works to do.
I think that would absolutely make sense, but, you know, where on the list of priorities do you want to put more traffic calming devices?
I wonder, the park will be back there eventually, our very big park. So I wonder, what kind of impact will that have? You know, I know we're looking at school zones, but just as people are going through there, that's something else to consider. I mean, I don't know exactly what it will do, but it's just, it will become more highly trafficked.
A little more traffic.
Soon.
Sure.
People trying to get in and out, and convenience, inconvenience, whatever. It won't just be the slowness of a school zone or, you know.
And then you're going to have the YMCA right across from the high school as well.
Yeah.
And that's going to bring a lot of people.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the Red Zone program.
A motion by Ms. Malcolm to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Little? there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 I'm sorry, we're gonna have to do a voice vote. Mr. Little?
Yes.
Yes. Ross Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Crawford?
Yes.
Ms. Malcolm?
Yes.
We've now left Mr. Larry Bradley.
No.
Mr. Garrett?
No.
Mr. Gregory?
No.
Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
And for clarification, this is for an initial one-year term contingent upon the other approvals by the GDOT and school bodies, correct?
I'll offer that with my motion.
The yeses have it 5-3. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. We appreciate your coming out 2 weeks in a row.
1.5, I guess.
Yes, sir. Moving to the Walton Plaza facility exterior and roof renovation on the remaining buildings, Mr. Probst.
All right, thank you, Mayor. We discussed this a good bit last week. We're requesting an expense totaling $1,449,936 to Garland Company for re-roofing and exterior renovation of the entire remaining buildings. That's in your packet, A, B, C, D, and E, next to the current police station at the old Walton Plaza. And Building A will again be used as a future telecom kind of redundant head-in area, and that'll be paid for from those new bond telecom funds. And the remainder will be basically borrowed from the reserves, and we'll pay those back as soon as we're able to rent out the remaining shopping center spaces, which we've almost got a waiting list right now, so.
And the facade on the front will be
Yes.
changed as well?
Well, it'll match the new
Okay,
police station.
because it looks really bad.
It does, it does. And this kind of goes along with what we already talked about with the RFQ for master planning the entire site. So it's basically, the next step here in getting it all done and eventually selling off some of those outlots as well to help pay all this back.
Are there any questions or comments for Mr. Probst? If none, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve.
I have a motion by Mr. Gregory to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Ross Bradley. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries, that passes. Mr. Probst, Downtown Development Authority intergovernmental agreement, please.
Yes, sir. This is an intergovernmental agreement concerning the transfer and sale of 116 South Broad Street in downtown Monroe. That is the current home of the police department. And we're going to enter into this agreement so that they can assist us with the sale and an RFQ, more than likely, to find not only the best dollar value for the sale of the building, but also the right fit for downtown according to DDA's priorities. And this outlines how the proceeds will be split, 90% to the city, 10% to the DDA. And that's the gist of this document.
Thank you, Mr. Probst. Are there any questions or comments for Logan?
So the way this would work would be that the DDA they would actually be the person to market the sale of the building. They would ask for those interested parties to bring in a proposed plan of what they want to do with the building, and then from there, they'd make a selection.
Yeah, so it's not just weighted on price, it's
Right.
weighted on best fit as well. It's probably a combo of those items. But the Downtown Development Authority has those powers that city government usually wouldn't have at the disposal of that asset.
Okay.
Are there any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to
Mayor, I'll move we approve.
I have a motion by Mr. Ross Bradley as our representative to the DDA.
I'll second it.
A second by Mr. David Dickinson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, like sign. Motion carries, that passes. Moving to the resolution of the budget amendment for planning and code, RFQ project funding. I believe that goes to Mr. Rosenthal.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a resolution adopting 2021 budget revisions for the city of Monroe, Georgia, appropriating revised amounts as shown in each budget expenditures, adopting the revised revenue projections, and prohibiting expenditures to exceed appropriations. Be it resolved that the mayor and council of the city of Monroe, Georgia as follows. Whereas for the purpose of financing the conduct of affairs of the city of Monroe during the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2021 and ending December 31, 2021, the revised budget of the city's revenues and expenditures for such period as prepared and submitted to the city council by the city administrator and so approved by the mayor and city council, whereas the amounts listed on the attached are the appropriations and transfers so authorized by the mayor and city council and are approved for the amounts and purposes indicated. Be it further resolved that the expenditures shall not exceed the appropriations authorized by this budget and that the expenditures for the fiscal year shall not exceed funding available. So adopted this 11th day of May 2021. That is the resolution, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Are there any questions for Paul? Not, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve.
A motion by Mr. Tyler Gregory. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Malcolm. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries, that passes. Moving to the Madison Avenue Electric Rebuild, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a multi-year CIP project that is the rebuild of Highland Avenue and Madison Avenue. This is the first phase. This is to replace the conductor mostly, but about 88 poles as well as transformers and other infrastructure that have been on that street for many, many, many years. This will create a southern feeder that will allow us to feed electricity over to Broad Street in a more efficient way than we can now during emergencies. The total budget for this was $726,700. We did a sealed bid. The material, there was no complete material seal bid, so we picked the best prices from all of the individual seal bids. There was a complete and accurate seal bid for labor, and that total comes to $518,145.35, with Irby, Gresco, Ace Pole, and UTEC being the winners of the bids. I'll take any questions.
How far is that going out Madison Avenue?
It's going from Maryville Street to the jail, so all the way. That is the extent of our territory. The jail is the southern length of our territory.
And do you have an estimated time?
Oh, they have 60 days on the bid. The problem, Ms. Malcolm, is with everything else we're trying to do is material. We have a good bit of it, talking to these providers. There are some things that we may have to, some of the transformers may have to leave in place and replace later as they come in. But we need to wait until Mr. Steele gets done with his paving and then alert the contractor. He has 60 days to start and 60 days to finish. So, but I will keep y'all abreast of how that's going and once that project starts.
Does that include any switchgear?
There is an automated switchgear at Brown Oil, and there's, I think there's another one down on the southern side of the one at Brown Oil is the most important one.
Okay. Does this come out of?
CIP.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Thompson? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve the project.
A motion by Mr. Little. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Larry Bradley. Is there any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, like sign. Motion carries, that passes. Moving to the presentation of the Downtown Green Plan and request for authority to pursue funding. Prior to getting into this with Logan, I don't know if you received my email from this afternoon. I had a discussion with Mr. Little on a way to fund this without going to GMA for a loan. And I'll just read it. Keeping you in the loop, I've discussed park funding with Mr. Little and come up with an option that may be more palatable to everyone. We recommend pursuing a loan as a line of credit from our utility MCT reserve fund with a balance of $17 million in an amount up to $2.5 million. There are two reasons for doing so. Number one, the GMA loan would be a fixed loan in the amount of $3.2 million at a 2.5% rate versus a line of credit that will be drawn over time. And number two, were we to take out the line of credit at 1%, our pay down on debt would be much less, which would allow us to pay back the total much more quickly. I propose we complete the projects at Matthews Park and the new downtown green, as those are repaid, and this is an absolute commitment from council. We will move to re-up for another round of funding for Hammond, Kidd, and Coker. The only park holdout that may require additional funding for is the new Reliant River Park. That appears to have some upfront investors that may require matching from the city to move forward. We will discuss that at a later date. If you'll see below, our funding sources to pay down the credit line are plentiful. And an email from Mr. Probst. On average, so far this SPLOST cycle, we've received $58,000 per month for our parks program, or around $700,000 for the year. Expect this to go up based on the Monroe Pavilion opening next year. We only have 43 months of collections remaining, or a total of about $2.5 million conservatively. We have about $610,000 currently available in SPLOST Parks funds. Keep in mind, we can use some SPLOST transportation funds currently available to build the additional public parking areas and sidewalk around the perimeter, so that lessens the bill to Parks SPLOST by about $450,000. We estimate we need $3.2 million at most for the Downtown Green Phase 1. All we were trying to do was advance fund the Downtown Green project, so we are shovel-ready this fall. After completing the project, we will be able to hopefully receive some reimbursable grants totaling in excess of $500,000 conservatively. Because we have put in for more, we just can't announce those at this time. The GMA lease purchase was a quick idea to get us ready. The best and easiest option is to use utility MCT funds to complete the project and pay it back down from SPLOST proceeds and 1% interest from the general fund. Easily done, no additional debt. If we did this, it would allow our Park SPLOST capital and program to continue for all parks at some level. Thank you, John Howard. So, Mr. Probst.
Yeah, that about sums it up. So,
Question would be,
yep.
can anybody borrow from that money?
What do you mean?
You saying you borrowed from the utility fund to do the project for the Downtown Green. But last week, y'all was saying we didn't have no money to finish Matthew Park.
In the
Let
general
me ask
fund.
you this, could you have borrowed that money to finish Matthew Park?
Well, that's kind of what we're saying here now.
No, that's what you're saying now. Because that ain't what was said last week.
No, I think that's not what I said at all last week.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
before we get into a discussion, I want to make a motion on it. It will address, I think, the concerns that Mr. Garrett has, because I share some of his concerns about Matthews.
Yes, sir.
So could I make a motion and then?
Please
if
do
it
so.
gets a
Motion second and
then
discussion. Gotcha.
We can discuss this. So, as all of you know, I'm very much a proponent of getting our park system back up to snuff. The county let us down on it in the 10 years that they had control. And so we've got a huge task ahead of us. That's why we have the SPLOST allocation, 30% of the SPLOST funds to the parks. Everybody I hear from says, we love what you've done so far. We just want to see you complete the job. So, this is my motion. I move that we do loan the money to ourselves out of the MCT. We got $17 million in there. We loan ourselves $2.5 million to proceed with this project. I think that'll do it completely. But conditions on that motion. We finish Matthews Park first before we turn a shovel of dirt on the town green. And what needs to be done out there, the paving needs to be redone. One of the pavilions needs to be rebuilt, which is the metal pavilion, and perhaps expanded. I think we got enough money to do that. And we need to make sure we restore the fishing out there in the lake, because it's my understanding that's kind of gone too. So with those things, those conditions, I move that we move forward with this.
Thank you, Mr. Dickinson, for your motion.
In addition, it probably also, with the motion that Mr. Dickinson made, Pavilions, yes. And they're probably gonna need another bathroom in the back, as long as we get the paving and restock the pond. Because it's,
I think you're spot on. I was just about to go to that. We've got your motion on the floor.
I'll amend to add that.
And wanted to ask Mr. Bailey, do you have your list? Did you? Well, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Now, what I had kind of put together, and I took from the original plan that you guys had looked at several years back, and Mr. Steele and I had talked about the paving. We could do the demo in-house, and then to come back, build the base, repave everything that exists. I figured it around about $95,000. And then Ms. Crawford and I had discussed putting another pavilion where that restroom came down, because that opens that space up. And then we can clearly take down that metal one and put another one up. And then I figured in additional tables to go under the new pavilion that we would add, to then essentially put shade structures over the side where the benches are around the pond that don't have natural shade. Put the fountain in to aerate the pond, stock the pond. I think we'd reached out to DNR. They'll come in, do a study, from my understanding, restock it. We can bring in essentially kind of the size fish we want, which would be nice to any lake I go to if I could catch the size I wanted. We were looking at about $185,000. If we look at the additional restroom in the back, I think the only trouble we're gonna have, sewer may exist. Water, power would be an issue. We could possibly, and what I would suggest is we take a look and see what the usage is on the restroom that we just put out, how successful kind of it is, how busy, I guess, so to speak, that it stays, before we add another one, but it's definitely, we can figure it out. But that was the different things I had figured out. We can, you can kind of, you've got that little pull-off parking area right there at the front. I think originally they'd, had some different things designed there. We could kind of go back to where that's a green space, kind of decorate, beautify the roadside. It's just kind of, you go with an additional 200,000, you can do all of that, and then we can figure out what we want to do with the restroom. If that's something that we want to do, we could possibly.
We don't figure out, we want the second restroom. That part been figured out. So we didn't need to figure out a way to do it. That's what she just asked for.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. We just have to look at services that we can get back there if that's something we want to do.
If that's the case, it may need to go back where the original one was.
Right, because it would be hard to get it on that backside.
where it was is cool. Because the one up front, and that's kind of in the back where it was.
Where it was is,
Yeah,
Well,
we'll figure out a new pavilion placement from there if that's the most logical.
so that might be the thing. You might could put the restroom where that original one was and put the pavilion over on the backside. That might be a good
If I'm not
compromise.
mistaken, either it was a bathroom on the other side of that walkway going across that bridge, or it was just another building over there.
Mm-hmm,
yeah, there wasn't a restroom.
right.
Is that acceptable?
And I don't,
Yeah, and I got one more thing about it.
Yes, ma'am.
And as far as the trails, is there a way to get trails around there or no?
I know Krista Carroll was actually either out there, we couldn't figure, it was today or going out there tomorrow to take a look at kind of going back and putting in more of a natural type of trail that's walkable. What used to be there, I know when I was a kid. And
It had walking trails in them.
because I used to.
Right.
I know that because I walked them before.
And that used to be, that was before we cleared out a lot of trees, and like I said, the Frisbee golfers, they come in, they've got essentially what would, equate to fairways. But yeah, I think the original plan had a concrete sidewalk throughout it. I don't think I would go that route. I think I would leave it more of a natural park, because I think you lose that feel of putting in nature trails if you concrete it. But, yeah, anything can be
Just have
done.
to make sure we maintain it if we.
Correct.
If we put it.
And that's the main thing.
And then at night, having that, do we rope that off after dark?
Rope off like the
The entrance?
no, ma'am.
Just
I mean, you just.
as close as it does?
Yeah, I mean, we've got automatic locks on the restrooms that close at the time that we set them, so essentially dusk to dawn.
So basically, Mr. Dickinson, would you like to reword your motion?
Okay, so my motion is that we move forward with this, we borrow the money from MCT, we do the things that we have enumerated out at Matthews, those things get done on the front end before we do anything on the town green, then we turn to the town green when Matthews is completely finished out.
Including the potential second bathroom
Yes,
and the trail.
yes.
Anything else?
And the pavilion on the other side,
And the pavilion on the other side
and
and,
the pavement.
You might need to amend that, the amount of that money that you proposed.
I'm sorry?
Sounds like we might need to up the amount of the money just a little bit to cover the extra cost. I'm having a hard time hearing everybody clearly, so I might be off base there.
He just wants to up the,
You want to up,
You want to ask for more money?
He thinks it's gonna be more than 2.5 total for the town green and the improvements.
if we add that restaurant, and I'm sure it will be, we add a restroom.
I mean, originally it was 3.2, we were at 2.5, and look, I'm not for spending more money just for the
well,
sake of
just-
spending money.
just-
Be
But
just so you know, Ross, and everybody else, the loan or line of credit is coming after we spend the 610,000 that is currently available. So we're still at the 3.2 with another 58 coming in this month. So,
okay.
so yeah,
All right, that makes more
that's why
sense.
we ended up at 2.5.
Oh, sorry, David and everybody else.
Okay, so I have a motion on the floor by Mr. Dickinson with the amendments.
I'll second.
As noted by Ms. Crawford.
One more question. We have an expected repayment of 4 years virtually.
Yes, sir. So, the good thing is that, we're gonna have a reimbursable grant. We've put in for another one as well. We've got some additional SPOS capabilities. So what we'll end up doing, how the mechanics of it work is, goes MCT to general fund. We'll set up an advanced funding project account in the general fund. And then as we are shovel ready and we're able to do the downtown green project out of that borrowed funding, the SPOS money will then be eligible to pay back the general fund. And then the general fund will then subsequently pay back the MCT.
So that's what I was looking at.
Yeah, and it's not open-ended.
Some SPOS and,
Yeah.
4 years.
Yeah, I would like to have this completely paid back by the end of this SPOS term, if not sooner,
This SPOS term ends in 3 years, correct?
3.5 years. Yeah.
So I have a motion on the floor with a whole bunch of amendments by Mr. Dickinson, second by Ms. Crawford. Is there any further discussion?
I want to be sure I understand. I think I understand what Logan just said, but on the repayment, that the repayment would come from either existing SPOS or grants.
Grants or donations if anybody wants to write us a big check. So.
Right, but no, but that the repayment would be done within the next 4 years. And we would not use any funds other than that generated by SPOS, by the existing SPOS, and grants.
And donations.
And donations.
Yeah, that's.
But no other taxpayer funds.
No, that's the methodology to pay it back, right? So it just cleans things up, so we're not going into any more debt.
And we certainly appreciate the flexibility of the utility, and that's come up in the last.
I would just amend the motion to include what we just talked about as far as the repayment, that, you know, it would be over a 4-year period of time, coming out of the SPOS or grants or donations, but no other taxpayer funds would be utilized.
I have a motion on the floor by Mr. Dickinson, a second by Ms. Crawford, an amendment by Mr. Bradley discussing that will be paid back with no additional taxpayer funds over 4 years through SPLOST grants or individual donations, which would really be neat. Do I need another second with the amendment?
Need a second to the amendment.
Yes, to the amendment that Mr. Larry Bradley made, yes, sir.
A second by Mr. Nathan Little. Got a lot of players involved there. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Now, you're voting on the amendment first, correct?
We're voting on the motion with the amendment.
I think you have to vote on the amendment, don't you, Mr. Rosenthal?
If we're going to follow the strict rules of structure, we would need to vote on the amendment, but generally, our adopted and accepted principles would be to accept the amendment and vote on it. But if you're insisting on particular rules, we can certainly take a vote on the amendment itself.
Is that acceptable?
I'm good, I just want to make sure we're doing.
On the motion with the amendment, thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. That passes. Thank you so much, everybody.
I'd also like to say, Mr. Mayor, just great job, everybody, on problem solving that whole thing and sorting that out. We've had a lot of talk about having discussions about problems and sorting it out in council, and we really did that on that, and people behind the scenes worked, talked it out, figured out, ways to fund the whole thing. That's awesome. I'm just, people a lot of times talk about whatever they want with government, but that was a good one. Way to go. I'm just saying. Good deal.
Thank you, Tyler. Moving to the Personnel Hearing Officer, Mr. Probst.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Pursuant to amendments last year of our personnel policies, the appeals and grievance policy procedures, specifically Section 12, outlines the need for a personnel hearing officer. And we have before you Mr. Roy Mannell from Fordson Bentley Griffin. He's nominated to serve as our PHO for a rate of $300 an hour, and it'll be a 4-year term. And he is out of Athens, which is where the firm's located.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Probst?
And he's, background's in your packet there. He's very well versed in employment law, and being, just out of Walton County and Monroe's unbiased in the matters.
Do we guarantee him any business?
No, he just serves at the pleasure of the mayor and the city administrator whenever appeals come up.
I'm saying, he would never get paid if we didn't have any appeals.
No.
I move that we accept Roy Mannell.
I have a motion by Mr. Nathan Little to accept. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. David Dickinson. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. 1 against. Motion carries. That passes. Moving right past the mayor's update tonight, I need a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
I have a motion by Ms. Malcolm. Is that you, Norman? Motion by Mr. Garrett, second by Mr. Garrett. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. That passes. Good night.